Welcome to the Tactical Business Podcast. I am your host, Wade Skalsky, and today we're speaking with Jon LaCorte of Tract Optics. Jon, how are you doing today?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing better than you're doing. I hear you guys are in the midst of some website turmoil.
Yeah, there's always something going on. You know, an e-commerce platform, you just always something to deal with, and today's no different.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the podcast and keeping your commitment. I know sometimes in business things can get a little squirrely, so I appreciate it. But I'm super excited to talk to you today. Let's talk a little bit about sort of what was your path to get to where you are with Tract Optics. I mean, what was the the journey that you took?
So I worked for Nikon from 1999 to 2014, and basically was their senior product marketing manager. So I handled all of the product development and marketing for a little over 15 years. Prior to that, I was in the wholesale meat and seafood business, and just wasn't happy with my job, and looked at the New York Times one day, and there was an ad that said marketing hunting. And being from New York, not a lot of jobs related to hunting. Matter of fact, none of the people I grew up with were hunters. I grew up right in New York City, but my father, my grandfather, my uncle were all lifelong hunters, and we had property in upstate New York, and so I was a city boy Monday through Friday, and Saturday and Sunday I was hunting and walking through the woods, and learning everything I could about being an outdoorsman.
What kind of hunting were you doing?
So basically, big game was whitetail deer, and then we had squirrels and grouse and turkey. There's some pretty good hunting in New York. A lot of people think in New York and all they think about is Manhattan, the big city. But an hour's drive either upstate New York or out east on Long Island, and there's some tremendous whitetail deer hunting.
Yeah, I know you don't relate when you think of New York, you don't think of a hunting culture at all, right? And so I'm excited to hear that there is in fact those opportunities. So you grew up hunting as a kid, you're looking to kind of move out of the camera space, and then how long have you worked over there?
Well, it was 15 years, but I actually worked in the sport optics division at Nikon. Obviously, Nikon very well known for cameras,
Oh,
but they
okay.
also had a rifle scope, binocular, spotting scope, rangefinder division. They've since got completely out of hunting and shooting. And I saw the writing on the wall, and another gentleman, John Allen, who worked at Nikon, we both left Nikon and started Tract Optics.
I see.
And what we do different is we're a direct to consumer brand. So we don't sell our product through the retail stores. And the reason for that is the retail stores are marking optics up more than they ever have been before. Um, you're paying a lot more for optics because, the average gun store, or even the big box stores, they're not making the type of money they used to make on firearms and ammunition. So they're making it up on accessories. And optics over the past 10 or 15 years has gotten to be a cash cow for these retailers. And what's happening is they're pushing the manufacturers for more and more profit every year. And in order to do that, the manufacturers still got to make money. They've got to continue to give the big box stores a higher and higher margin every year. So what's occurring right now is that the product is suffering and the consumer is suffering, because in order to get the numbers to work, to continue to give the retailer those high margins, you end up having to cut the quantity, the quality of the product in order to, satisfy that situation. So instead of focusing on the consumer, these big brands are more focused on taking care of the dealers, the retailers. That's not our position. Our position is to build a high quality product, cut out the middleman, and give that consumer the best value in the industry.
Yeah, so I misunderstood your path because so you actually were working in the optics business at Nikon, and then you're like, okay, we're gonna start our own business. That must have been going from that, like Nikon is about as corporate as it gets. So going from that corporate environment to sort of bootstrapping your own business was a huge mindset change. Like, what is there a history of entrepreneurship in your family, or you were just like, we're doing this? How did you
Yeah,
make that transition?
yeah. Honestly, a lot of praying, a lot of reflection. It was a very big risk, to be honest with you. John and I both had, executive level positions, and a lot of benefits. working for a great company. However, again, the direction they were going kind of indicated that, that division might not even exist anymore. So it was kind of one of those things that we did it because we knew what was going to happen. But we both love the industry. We love the product. Working at Nikon, I mean, it wasn't a job. I literally loved what I did. I developed, products for hunting and shooting. So I've been a lifelong hunter and shooter, so it was a natural fit. Um, and it allowed us to kind of learn a lot about the industry itself. Between John and I, we've got over 40 years of experience in the optics category. We're now Tract is going to be 10 years old in December, so I don't really know if you could call us a new company anymore. But because we're direct to consumer, we don't have the visibility that a lot of other brands have. So you can walk into a Cabela's or a Bass Pro and you could check out, a multitude of different brands, look through them, feel them. You can't do that without products. So that's a challenge. But thankfully, we're able to build such a high level product at such a great value that the word of mouth of someone who goes out and buys our product, goes on our website, writes a review, gives us a call and tells us, hey, I did my research. I saw the reviews. I knew this was going to be a good product. I didn't think it was going to be that good. That's really refreshing, and it just keeps it alive, and just allows us to keep focusing on giving the consumer, giving everything back to them. We don't put really high margins on our products like other brands do. We're a premium level product, so we're not the entry level type stuff. But we're kind of in that position where we're not competing at those lower prices, and we're not in the stratosphere as far as the European products, but our products are going to compare favorably to those high-end European products without the cost.
Well, and what I love about your positioning is, you decided, okay, you know, what is manageable over the long term? Because if you go for the volume side, there's so many, everyone wants to go just compete on price, but if you compete on price, typically it's always a race to the bottom. So what
Exactly.
what went into what went into the decision to how to position yourself, right? So you get out of Nikon, you're going to make your first product. What went into that decision? Like, how did you come to say, all right, we're going to be a premium in the premium category, and we're going to price it like this? Because I think a lot of people struggle with pricing. I struggle with pricing on certain things too.
Yeah, so to be honest with you, when we started the company, we were very, very much focused on the hunting market. So our entire product lineup as far as rifle scopes were 1-inch tubes. We didn't have any 30 millimeter tubes. We didn't have any 34 millimeter tubes. Now the breadth of our line has completely changed, where we still offer those hunting products, but the fastest growing segment of this market is long range shooting. So because we deal direct with the consumer, we hear firsthand what they like, what they don't like, what they want, what they don't want. When I worked at Nikon and I was in charge of product development, by the time the message got to me from the consumer, it had gone through so many people that the message changed. So a guy walks into a store, he talks to the clerk behind the counter, tells him what he likes, what he's looking for, tells his buyer what he's looking for. That guy tells the Nikon sales rep. The Nikon sales rep tells the Nikon sales manager. The sales manager then comes and tells me. So it's like the game of telephone, right? By the time that message got back to me, it had changed. That doesn't happen now because we're hearing it directly from the horse's mouth, and we're able to take that information and build what these people are asking us for. So, like I said, we had 1-inch tubes. People were hounding us. Where are the 30 millimeter tubes? So we launched a complete line of 30 millimeter. And then as long range shooting continues to grow, people are looking for higher magnification, larger tubes so they could dial further. So then we came out with the 34 millimeter tubes. So we've expanded our line just based upon what the market is telling us to do.
Well, and I think it's smart for your position because my theory on why the long range precision market is growing is because the AR market is kind of saturated now, right? So like they've run out of there's every single they're Legos, but they've run out of every Lego to put on the AR market, right? And so but now they can. I think a lot of the larger businesses are starting to push over to promoting long range shooting because it's just like an AR, just but for a different distance, right? And obviously it's not the platforms are all different and it's not interchangeable like that, but you still have the components that you need. You still have all, the actual platforms themselves. And so that's my theory in a way. I think the bigger companies are pushing the long range shooting so much and it's growing so fast.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And, consumers are always looking for what's new. And, long range shooting is not new, but it's new to a lot of people.
Hmm.
So, and the great thing about it is there's so many aspects of it because long range means different things to different people. I remember when 1,000 yards was an extremely long shot. Now most of the, events that I'm involved in, we start at 1,000. So it's again, it's changed. And then you get to the rimfire side of it where now guys are shooting rimfires out further than they ever have been before, which is a great additional option because you don't need the same amount of space as you do to shoot center fire long range. If you've got 300-400 yards, that's long range for rimfire. Whereas again for center fire, that's not considered long range to long range shooters, so to speak. So you got NRL Hunter, so you've got different categories. So it's evolving so rapidly that I don't see it slowing down anytime soon.
Well, and I think it's more of a cerebral part of shooting, than say if you're gonna get really good with your pistol, right? So there's a lot more there's a lot more moving parts with regards to if you're gonna compete in pistol shooting um or just a regular long gun. Whereas for long range shoot, there's so much thinking that's involved, right? And there's so much like of the gear that's involved. And so I think it attracts a certain type of person where it's very cerebral and interesting. Like, I find it fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, and the amount of equipment that goes into it, I mean, you could do it, pretty inexpensively, to be honest with you. And then you can also, spend a fortune, getting into the sport. So it does allow people to get into the sport without really having to get crazy into investing. So yeah, obviously the better quality of equipment you have, the better your results, but it's not required to get involved in it.
So, and that's it. So you started out on the hunting side, then you started to go to the long range side. I know from your product inventory, you offer like binoculars and other accessories. So how do you, when you're going to make the decision to expand into a new product, how do you just do it based off demand? You say, okay, well, we're getting all these calls now, like, okay, or all this inquiry about binoculars or, long range scopes. So you have that demand, and then how do you take that from we're going to create a new product to actually the process of creating one? Walk me through that a little bit.
So, we've got great relationships with, many different subcontractors. And we basically design the product here in the United States, and then we take it to our subcontractor and they build to our specs. And honestly, that is what is happening with a vast majority of the brands. A lot of the brands like you to think that they're building the product. All you really have to do is turn it over and see that virtually almost every optic is not made in the USA. And those that are assembled in the USA get their glass from somewhere else. Because there really is no glass supplier in the United States that can produce high quality and glass in vast enough numbers for these type of optics. So, it's kind of a cottage business. A lot of the brands are all made in some of the same factories. It's what you do to separate yourself. And one of the things that we do to separate ourselves is we use something called shot glass. And shot is a brand of glass that's used by all of the high-end European companies. Nobody at our price point is using shot glass because it's too expensive. But again, because we don't have that middleman, we can build features and specs into our products that you just can't find at our price. So yeah, it's a process that we basically go through, prototyping, testing, and then when everything meets our satisfaction, then we go to production. So it's really not a difficult thing to do. I mean, basically anybody can go to Asia and slap their name on a product. It's whether that product is built to a specification and level that is going to last and going to be quality. Excuse me.
Yeah, and I think the magic is it's in the idea and then the execution of, okay, what's going to work in reality, right?
Yeah.
And that's where all of your experience comes into play. I mean, you have all the experience that you had at your time at Nikon, and then obviously now with a decade in the business as well. How have things changed in the market, besides the increase in demand? Um, are you finding that the consumers are more like highly sophisticated and educated now, or what has changed in the last 10 years?
Yeah. Honestly, a lot has changed in the last 10 years. The quality has changed, the optical quality. You're getting so much better quality. Um, but again, the consumer is very educated because of something called the internet. You can now go and you could do your research and find out very easily, what separates one product from another, what do people like about it, what don't they like about it. Ratings and reviews are very powerful. I mean, I use rating and reviews for just about everything I buy, but to be honest with you, most of the time I look at the negative reviews because I want to see what people don't like about a product. Anybody can talk positively about a product. It's really what do you see that people find faults with. And some of those faults may not even matter to you because they're not applicable, but it gives you a good idea of what that product is really about. And thankfully, we get very positive reviews.
Well, and that social proof aspect, I think that's going to become even more important going forward as AI makes it very difficult to know what's real and what's not real. And so that social proof that you have and I think that grassroots distribution model that you have is also extremely important because, you've got, Larry talking to his buddy and saying, "Hey man, you got to check this out." And you have people who evangelize the business for you versus I don't think you get that same level when you just go into Cabela's and buy something.
Yeah, I mean, AI is something that just like anything else, it's good and it's bad. We've kind of run some tests. Like I watched this company, MDT, Modular Driven Technologies, and they basically had two experienced long range shooters. One guy used AI and one guy used the ballistic app to try to get, the solvers for, shooting at various targets with rimfire rifles. And initially AI came back totally wrong, not even close. And the ballistic app, the guy was hitting on first shot. So, there's, I don't think it's at a level yet where it's foolproof, but it will help people make a purchase decision. So,
Mhm.
very good in that aspect. Social media is very powerful. There's a lot of influencers out there. Unfortunately, a lot of influencers are paid and they're just promoting a product because they're getting a kickback for it. We don't really subscribe to any of that. We have people testing our product, but there are people that test all kinds of products, not just ours. So it adds a level of integrity that we're comfortable with.
Yeah, and it's a tricky thing because once the marketplace is very fickle, it'll turn on a brand very quickly if the brand does something they don't like. And so I think it's important from a business principle that people in the 2A space understand if you're going to start a business, it's how you present, your brand and what you do. It's like you can really jack up your brand really fast.
Well, and the thing about it, with social media and advertising, and I don't have to tell you this, firearms are not looked at positively in advertising. So, Google and Meta, they're very restrictive. They're starting to restrict YouTube. I know some influencers that had their pages shut down. Unfortunately, it's the world we live in. Um, I think it's wrong. Um, to stop anybody from doing something that's 100% legal. I mean, it's in our Second Amendment. It's our right, but yet, you know, there's restrictions. Our pages, our ads, very often get blocked because they're firearm related. There's times when even we're just advertising binoculars, but because the spiders crawl our web page and see that we also offer rifle scopes, it's difficult. It really is difficult to get the word out there. That's why we rely so much on word of mouth. Obviously we could do whatever we want on our social media pages, but trying to advertise is challenging.
So when you're gonna and that brings me to, like, you're gonna launch a new product, Do you have a strategy for how you're going to kind of get attention to it, or do you just kind of just put it on the website and then see how people are drawn to it, or how do you approach your launches of new products?
Yeah, I mean, depending on the product, we really try to get a great deal of content before the product even launches. So we'll try to get, our website, if you go to the bottom of our website, we've got how-to videos. We've got tons of videos, everything from just reviewing the, specs and features of a product to talking about, how do you set a zero stop? How do you reset the turrets to zero? All different, things about how to actually operate the scope. So, the videos are really important. We try to get some samples out to people to actually field test them and give reviews. So yeah, it's a pretty extensive content creation that we try to do for new products. Unfortunately, certain products we don't get either enough samples or samples that much further ahead of production that we have that much time to create that content. So, we could basically keep them in the warehouse under wraps until we get all the content. But, we're in business, obviously. Sometimes you got to put stuff up on the website when you don't have all the content you'd like. But we try to build the interest in it, build the content on it before we actually launch it.
Yeah, and I think when you're talking about inventory for a business that for like yours, how do you handle the supply chain and the delivery, right? So, for example, I just ordered something for my business, and UPS lost it, right? And I was like, "Oh man, I really need this," and so it really kind of messed with my time frame, right? So, is there a strategy that you guys have to deal with those types of like supply chain issues? Because I would think with this, especially because you have such a niche need in terms of like the shot glass or whatever for your, that's the manufacturing part of the process. I mean, just one little component that you can't get can freeze everything.
Yeah, I mean it's a very challenging thing. So we have to, we use, a rolling forecast. So we have to kind of look out, sometimes 12 months in advance and try to figure out, what the demand's going to be. And, we don't have a crystal ball, so it's almost impossible to gauge that right all the time. But, if you don't have the product in stock, somebody can't buy it. So we have to be very diligent in just watching the sales, taking into account, how long does that particular product actually take to produce. And then there's the shipping. You can airship something or you can ocean ship something. Ocean shipping is a lot less expensive than air shipping it. So if you're looking to try to maintain, a profit structure, sometimes you have to, ocean ship it because of cost, and sometimes you have to airship because of time. So that kind of is something we've got to try to balance. We spend a lot of time, just kind of crunching numbers and trying to figure things out. I mean, during COVID was really challenging because the lead time on, production went from anywhere between 4 to 6 months out to a year. So if you ordered something today, it would be ready to ship, basically the beginning of September 2026.
Yeah.
That's an insane amount of time to try to forecast. Because if you think about it, a year lead time, you make one little mistake and you're done for months and months and months, and you can't run a business like that. So you end up, having to really over inventory to make sure that, if you do have a run on a product, that you don't run out of it. So yeah, honestly, it's probably the biggest challenge is, keeping a good amount of inventory in stock without overbuying. And, obviously there's trends. The market the last few years has been very, very strong. Um, but, things have kind of slowed down a little bit. So it's gotten to be, more challenging, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and COVID is an interesting topic because a lot of we've done a lot of interviews now, and a lot of businesses were born during COVID, right? And so, but obviously, COVID was 5 years ago, so you had kind of a mature business. You made it to that 5 year mark, which is where most businesses don't even make it that far. And so you're cruising along, and COVID hits. Like, how did you survive COVID? Like, what is it? Just because you hadn't established an established base of people, or how did you walk me through kind of how you navigated that challenge?
I mean, we're a small company, so we're able to kind of maneuver a lot, faster than maybe some of the the bigger companies. It's just like a big ship, really. You can't turn real quick. We can, so we can make changes pretty quickly. The great thing about our business is, we run it extremely lean. We don't have a 5-floor office building and hundreds of employees. It literally is John and myself. We run the day-to-day operations. We have a warehouse with, a warehouse manager that does all the shipping and receiving. And quite honestly, that's how we run our business, really lean. Allows us to mark the product up, that allows us to keep food on the table and lights on, and give the consumer the best deal we can.
Yeah, and I think like you talked earlier about how that was the game of telephone, from consumer feedback, right? Where well, when you have all those levels, that's not nimble at all. And then also because you're direct to consumer, you can change whatever you want. You just go on the website and change it, right? Which is an
Yep.
unbelievable advantage. Whereas like if I'm selling to Cabela's or whatever, I can't tell Cabela's what to do. Like I can send them my inventory, but then they're going to do with it whatever they want to do with it. And so I think that's a very people might look at being small as a disadvantage, but I think that's one of the big advantages of being small and being, the advantage of using the internet.
Yeah, I mean, that was, one of the challenges. These big box stores, they would dictate what you price the product at, and then they would tell you, okay, it's got to be at, let's say, 3.99. But we got to make 40 points. Well, then you're like, well, that's really hard for us to do. We can't raise the price because then you're not competitive. So again, they ended up with what was happening at Nikon. I know what's happening with all the other brands. You get squeezed, and it gets to the point where the only way to get those numbers to work, you start taking features out, and the consumer loses, because you know what, his buddy bought this product last year, was really happy with it. You know what? The guy goes out and buys that same product, and he paid the same price for it, but his buddy's got features that you don't have anymore. The consumer's not stupid. I mean, the internet makes it very easy to do research. So, things are supposed to improve in time. And unfortunately, that's not what's happening. I mean, we hear it every day from consumers that are doing direct comparisons, and how disappointed they are in some of the brands that they've been using for many, many years, that they see the quality slipping. We
Well,
don't.
and I think, you have for the, the internet has unlimited inventory space, right? So, it's not when you send something to like a retailer or whatever, they have whatever shelf space they have. That's what they can show, right? So you're not only competing with they want the points, but you're competing with other brands as well, and they're right next to each other. Whereas when someone comes to your site and that's where you sell it, there are no other brands on them to get distracted by. They just are on your site. They're looking at it. They're making their decision based on you have them in your world. And I think that the aggregation of that power in some of these big box stores is a negative for the consumer for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why like for now, have you ever thought about doing like more like local gun stores because um you don't have that issue as much, right? I mean, they still want to mark it up, obviously, but like you're kind of like you're more mom and pop people, more like you, like we're like they're smaller, they started it, they're a small team, and so like you can have those relationships. Have you thought about doing that, or are you just saying no? We're gonna stick with what we got.
So honestly, we probably get calls or emails weekly from, dealers that want to basically create a dealer account. And unfortunately, we the way we design the product, um that margin that dealer needs is not built in.
Mm.
So, that's the first thing, and really kind of the more important thing. And I'll never say never, but our goal is to continue to be direct to consumer, because the minute we start to offer our product through any type of a retail store, the price is immediately going to go up,
Right.
because that dealer needs to make a margin. That's what that's what he lives off of. The minute they do that, the minute we're no longer any different a company than any other brand out there. Right now, we are different because we feel that, again, the price that you pay you're going to pay hundreds of dollars more for a competitive product with these features. So you go to a dealer, at a minimum, he's going to want to add 30 points.
Yeah.
And now no different than Loophole or Vortex or anybody else out there. Right now, we're different because, again, the quality that we're providing for the price really can't be compared.
Well, and the other problem I think that you would have in that scenario is that you're going to create friction in your business because now you have this new administrative problem where you're like, okay, we have to manage these business, you have to add the shipping, you have to add the management of these dealer accounts. Like it just adds more cost um, on top of what you're already doing. That's really interesting. I never really thought about it in kind of the way that you're describing to me as an advantage of direct to consumer in that way. Um, all right. So we talked about how things have changed in the last 10 years. We know that precision shooting is growing. Where do you see things going in the next 3 to 5 years? What is your kind of plan? Is you just going to do more of the same? Are there new products on the horizon? Kind of what do you see for you guys over the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, we always have new products on the horizon. I think that's the foundation of a company that, wants to continue to grow. That's what drives our industry. And it's no different than, I look at the golf industry. Guys will go out and buy the next best, greatest driver because they think they're going to drive the ball 10 yards further than they do now. Guys think that the new cartridge is going to allow them to shoot more accurately or, kill an animal at greater distances or shoot tighter groups. So, if you don't have something new, then to me, it just kind of becomes stagnant.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and what's nice about your products is that it can grow with the customer. So, I'm sure you have different price points for your products as well, right? And so like as I come in your entry level products and it's a premium product, but for me it's like an entry level product. And then as I get better, I'm going to get a different gun. So I just take that scope and put it on the old gun and get a new one, scope higher end for the new gun, right? And so you can grow with the customer in that way.
Yeah, so when we introduced the company, we actually had some lower priced rifle scopes and binoculars because we just wanted to offer that. That's most brands do. To be honest with you, our customers were all gravitating towards the higher spec,
Hmm,
higher priced products.
interesting.
So we kind of, we moved away from those products because they just weren't selling at a rate that, made sense. So it's kind of one of those things, and I'll do my best to describe this, but when you're talking about products that are under $300, and that's really where Nikon lived, for those years that I worked there. When you talk about the difference in pricing without the dealer markup, when you talk about that pricing at a $300 product versus a $1,500 product, that amount of money is not as significant. So you basically, if you were saying saving 20 or $30, you know, that may be a big deal to some people. But if you're saving $300, that's a big deal to a lot of people.
But I guess what I was trying to say was entry, like are all of your scopes kind of the same price? Or so like
No.
you're right. So like what I was saying for you is like you'll have your entry level scope, not an entry level scope price point for like whatever. I'm saying you have an entry level scope, and then I'm assuming you can go up the food chain for pricing for your scopes at your company within your company, right?
So we do have what we kind of consider in our product line a good, better, and best.
Right. That's what I'm saying is like you can
Yeah.
grow with you can grow with the consumer. And maybe entry level is the wrong way of saying it in terms of it because I'm not in your vertical, but what I meant by that is that it appeared to me that you have these offerings where I come in as a beginner long range shooter, I get that good one, but then I start to get better. I was like, oh, I can get another one. Whereas a lot of times firearms are a tough business because there's not a lot of repeat business on it. Like yeah, people are buying 50 firearms all the time, but most people they don't buy a firearm every year, right? They might get one or two or whatever, and then but with a scope, and like I said, they can grow with the scope, and then when they do buy a new firearm, then they got to get a new scope. So you have a nice progression built within each for the lifetime value of a customer in your business, it seems.
Yeah, things have changed there too, though, to be
Mm.
honest with you. So, I
I
kind
like
of
being wrong. I'm wrong all the time on this one today. I love it. I love being.
no,
I
I'm,
love
I'm, I'm so, certainly not saying you're wrong, but I kind of look at my own personal situation where,
Mm,
my dad and my uncle got me into hunting. And, between them, they had maybe, I don't know, 2 or 3 deer rifles their whole
mhm,
life.
right.
Um, I think I bought 3 this year. So
Well, but you're in
the
the
cons
yeah.
right, but, even the guys that are my age that I hunt with, because it's changed. It
Mhm,
used to be that guy went out, bought 1 gun, he was good. Well, now the average guy is buying 1 gun, but then you know what? He may go on an elk hunt and he wants a Magnum cartridge to go with
mhm.
that. And then you know what? His buddies are getting into PRF shooting, so he's going to buy a different gun for that. So believe it or not, I think that the average number of guns maybe the average person owns today, I would have to think that it's considerably greater than it was, let's just say, a generation ago.
Well, I think that's true, and I think one of the reasons for that is that guns have become so much more, accessible, good guns, right? So, for example, like an AR, like, you can buy an entry-level AR right now, uh, for, like, $500. Whereas and it's a decent you can put 1,000 rounds through it, it's not gonna blow up in your face, right? There are so many options, and you also have manufacturing in different countries now, where you can buy good guns from other countries. Now that some people don't like it, but they'll be fine. And I think that the expansion of the market in that way, I think you're right. I think people do definitely own more guns than they did. Even, I'm 52, so even when I was younger, um, I think you're correct on that for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it seems that way, and obviously, rifle scopes is a more repetitive purchase than say binoculars.
What? Why
'Cause
is that? Why is that?
well, if you think about it, I mean, someone goes out and they buy a binocular, especially for hunting. They probably can use that binocular for just about every application, and it
Mhm.
lasts them for many, many years. There's not a lot of innovation in binoculars where when it comes to firearms, there's a new cartridge, there's a new, carbon fiber barrel, there's a new stock, there's a new action. So
Yeah.
there's always innovation that I think drives people to go out and repetitively buy those products. And like you said before, if someone goes out and buys a rifle, I mean, I don't even know what the percentage is. I saw it a while back, but the percentage of rifles being built without sights is like a monstrous number. So that means they got to put a scope on it.
Right.
Whereas years ago, a generation ago, it was kind of more of an anomaly that someone had a scope on their rifle because every gun had iron sights and scopes were kind of, a little bit newer. So now, I mean, everybody's using a scope.
Yeah, and those trends are interesting. And I mean, I think you have the advantage of you get to see all the numbers, right? So for me, when I'm thinking about these things, you're talking about that, I'm just kind of guessing about, well, with this, what seems intuitive to me. But that's the great thing about business, I think, is that the numbers always tell the story. It's you can think what you want to think about what you think is going to happen, but the numbers will tell you what's really happening out there.
Yeah, we always use the term numbers don't lie.
Right. Yeah. And I do you one thing a lot of people I've interviewed in the firearm space, they talked about during Trump, the first time, they had like there was the Trump slump, right? Like they really like purchases went down, people were kind of chilled out. Um, did you experience that in your business the first time? And then are you experiencing it now, or has your growth been relatively stable?
Yeah, I mean, we've been pretty stable. This year I think was probably a little different than a lot of people expected. Again, just being in the industry, we talked to a lot of other hunting and shooting related manufacturers, and I think that the average consumer was maybe you know not as worried as what was going to happen. The Democratic administrations are the best selling firearms reps there are. You know,
100%.
so now that you've got a Republican administration, I think people kind of looked back at what happened in the first term, and I think they're more comfortable now, and not as worried maybe as what could have happened. So it's kind of one of those things. It definitely seems like between the first administration, COVID, and then now things seem to be leveling off from maybe a I don't know, a preconceived thought process of what the actual demand was in our industry.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that things do seem to be stabilizing a little bit more on a lot of fronts. I think a lot of the social progressivism is people are like starting to like rein that in now. They're like, okay, we've had enough of this experiment. And I think it's when you have all those things start to kind of cool down a little bit, I think that people aren't as freaked out. Like but when you have every vector of your life where it's like COVID or like, whatever, and then all these social things that make no sense, I think that heightens people's anxiety, and then they're like they prepare more. They're more like, we got to be prepared in case something does, something
Yeah.
happens. Um, well, listen, I've loved talking to you, and I'd love to have you on the show again. How do people find you? Give us your website, your socials. If people want to contact you, maybe you can give them an email or something if they have questions, or a marketing email. Give us all your information.
Sure. The website is tractoptics.com if you're in the US. We do have a specific Canadian website, Australian website, and South African website. You can reach me directly at jon.lacorte@tractoptics.com. That's jon.lacorte@tractoptics.com. My phone number is 516-885-5621. You could email me, you could call me, you could text me. We've got a live chat on our website, which you might have heard just go off. So yeah, we try to make ourselves as accessible as possible. The consumer is the most important thing for us. So, while a lot of manufacturers, not only in our industry but in other industries, are looking for people to avoid calling them, we're the opposite. We want you to call, we want you to email, we want to try to help you in any way we can.
I feel like there's a little bit of the New York thing in there, like that, right? I think that I feel that I feel that a little bit, and giving out your phone number is aggressive. That's aggressive. And then what about your socials? Are
Yeah,
you
we're
on?
we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram.
Are you on Twitter?
I think we are. I'm not 100% sure. I know we weren't really doing very much there, but Instagram and Facebook is where, and YouTube, of course, is where most of our attention is.
Awesome. Well, I've loved having you on today. Would love to have you on the show again and see how things have changed in the next six months to a year.
Awesome. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, man. Thanks for coming on today.
All right. Take care.